Hello everyone, it's me, Ren, that person who likes to talk about things. Today we are going to talk about the term Mary Sue, because I just hate it. Just hate it so much. The term Mary Sue was coined by Paula Smith in the 1970s in a Star Trek parody story called A Trekkie's Tale, which was published in their Trek fanzine Menagerie. Side note, women were actually a huge part of making the Star Trek fandom and the fan conventions that we all know and love what they are today. So thank you, female nerds of the past. We love and appreciate you. With the term Mary Sue and her parody story, Smith was making fun of idealized self-insert characters that center the story around the author. Mary Sue is usually unrealistically flawless and perfect, and all the other characters love her. When applied to fanfiction, a genre dominated by teenagers flexing their writing muscles for the first time, the trope makes sense. And it's definitely something you've seen if you've read a lot of fanfiction, which I have. I have also written fanfiction with some intense Mary Sue vibes as a middle schooler. So the original use of Mary Sue wasn't all that harmful, and what it made fun of was also completely harmless. Just fans having fun and sharing their creations with other fans and making fun of them a little bit. Mary Sue was specifically used to describe characters that are the smartest, the most attractive, the most capable, multi-talented, kind, tragic, likable. They are essentially flawless, which makes them boring. Critiquing and making light fun of these characters, totally fine, particularly within the niche community that is fanfiction. Everyone else is gonna make fun of us, we might as well make fun of ourselves. However, and there's always a however, I know you were waiting for the however. The way the term is used and applied to fiction in general is something that I have a lot of issues with. First, the elephant in the room. I think the main problem with this trope and its usage is that it's sexist and is rooted in misogyny. I'm not gonna dance around it. I'm probably gonna lose subscribers for saying that, but I don't care because it's true. If this were not the case, we would not have a male version of this term to apply to male characters that exhibit the same traits. The fact that Mary Sue exists as a gendered term as shorthand to criticize female characters specifically indicates that it's not the traits being criticized, it's the character's gender and the expression of those traits through the character's gender. It's also worth noting that Paula Smith herself acknowledged the sexist usage of the term in this interview. She points out that although many male characters share a lot of the same characteristics as Mary Sue's, audiences don't react the same way or refer to them the same way. In reference to whether James Bond or Superman would qualify as a Mary Sue, Smith says, sure, any of these wish fulfillment characters whose presence in any universe warps it way the heck out of reality, but we don't notice that when it involves men. While there is a term that is similar, allegedly, for male characters, it's either Gary Stu or Marty Stu. Couldn't even decide on one because it's BS. They mostly exist so people can say, see, Mary Sue isn't sexist, Gary Stu also exists. A simple Google search of Mary Sue character yields 26,700,000 results, whereas searching Gary Stu character yields approximately 5,280,000 results. Searching Marty Stu character yields approximately 665,000 results. This trend is the same if you just search Mary Sue, Gary Stu, or Marty Stu, whatever, without adding character, but I wanted to try and filter out the results that might just be people named Mary Sue, right? The disparity in the usage of the terms is particularly important when you consider that overwhelmingly most speaking characters in movies and television are male. This means that despite making up a much smaller amount of protagonists overall, female protagonists are more likely to be classified as a Mary Sue than male protagonists are to be classified as a Gary Stu. This is obviously not extremely scientific. I don't think data that is scientific in this instance exists, but it does add some substance to the anecdotal evidence. Because how often have you actually seen a male character earnestly labeled a Gary Stu or a Marty Stu or whatever? Especially independently of defending labeling a female character a Mary Sue. That, like, eliminates basically all of those instances. Let's be real. It just doesn't happen. Despite a shocking repertoire of extremely competent, special, chosen male protagonists across various genres, the Stu label is simply not used. Meanwhile, female characters, even if they are deeply and explicitly flawed and make mistakes, are labeled as Mary Sues even when the label doesn't fit at its most basic level. Most recently, I have seen the term applied with a fair amount of aggression towards Rey in the new Star Wars series and Michael Burnham in Star Trek Discovery. But any female character with the competency of a male protagonist is likely to be called a Mary Sue in more than a few corners of the internet. Even Our Lady of Mech Suits, Ripley, is not safe from this criticism. So first, let's talk about Michael Burnham in Star Trek Discovery, because I feel like that is why half of you are here at all. In Season 1, Michael's actions contribute directly to the death of her captain and start a war that causes heavy casualties to the Federation. She's imprisoned and released when Captain Lorca decides she's useful enough to be worth the risk. There's also a lot of work she has to do to rebuild trust with people. She makes several huge mistakes that have dire consequences. Other than her one romantic interest in Season 1 and book in Season 3, we don't really see people universally being attracted to Michael or fawning all over her. Also, we just finished Season 3, and it doesn't look like she's gonna have as many love interests as Geordi, Riker, especially Riker, or even Data. Also, tangentially, I totally ship Burnham and Book over Burnham and Tyler. I don't like them together, and I think Book is way better for her. The whole Spock's sister arc doesn't really even make her any more competent, and while her Vulcan upbringing comes up, it doesn't give her huge advantages over other characters. I also really like how fraught her relationship with Spock was, and how obviously she had actually failed him as a sister in a pretty big way. Towards the end of Season 2, we see that Michael's emotions get in the way of her doing the hard thing that needs to be done, sending Ariam out the airlock. Nan has to do it for her. Side note, they did Ariam so dirty, I might actually make a separate video about just how angry I am about what Discovery did to its side characters, especially Ariam.
Ariam, hi, it's Tilly. Just a friendly reminder that you saved every memory you ever had with me. I think that's because you adored me. And I adore you too. This thing is making you do. This is not who you are. I can hear you, Tilly, but I cannot stop myself.
My heart and soul crushed. But I digress. So, Burnham's failure to do what needs to be done is incredibly dire for her character, especially when we consider Trek canon and previous Trek episodes like TNG's Thine Own Self, where Troy's test is sending Geordi to his death in a holodeck program.
Something severed the ODN conduit between here and the antimatter storage deck.
Geordi, could you repair the ODN conduit if you went to the crawl space?
Sir, he would never survive the radiation.
I know. Geordi, could you repair the conduit?
Yeah, I think I could.
Then do it.
It's a huge flaw in Michael's ability to perform as a Starfleet officer that she can't do that. When push came to shove and it was, airlock or the universe, she couldn't do it. A lot of her internal character struggle does have to do with her emotions and expressing them and understanding them. Even in Season 3, when we think Michael is redeemed and has grown past her impulsiveness, we see her fall from grace once more when she makes a decision to go off on her own when trust with the remnants of the Federation has only barely been established. This puts Discovery's position within the Federation totally in jeopardy. It jeopardizes the whole crew and potentially means that they could have been split up. It was a major mistake to put Saru and the crew in that position.
You think of the position you put your captain in? You put Starfleet in? The only reason you're not in the brig is because you saved lives.
And she gets disciplined, she's demoted, she's punished, and it's a painful moment.
I am sorry.
While I agree with your intentions, the decision I am now forced to make comes down to one thing and one thing only, Commander. It is about trust. I take no pleasure in this. As of now,
And while she does become a captain at the end of the season, her path to getting there involved making a lot of mistakes and having to prove herself over and over again. I think the reason that people see Michael as a Mary Sue is because she's the main character, and we spend the most time on her, especially in the early seasons. And at first, we really do pay for it in terms of a lack of development of other characters and storylines. I do think that the decision to focus on Michael to the extent that they did, especially in the first season, was frustrating for people who were expecting more of an ensemble show like Star Trek traditionally has been. But it doesn't take much scrutiny of Michael to see that she's flawed. She often makes short-sighted and brash decisions, doesn't always listen to others, and she thinks she knows best how to prioritize things in any situation, and she usually pays for it. And to be fair, I never exactly hated Michael, although I did used to dislike Discovery. It has grown on me. I know I'll lose more subscribers for that too, but it really does bother me how a lot of the critics just reduce their criticisms of her character to Mary Sue. She's a dynamic character with a complicated past who is sometimes the victim of overwrought dialogue and a series that doesn't really have enough time for all of its storylines and characters and relationships. And they definitely did try to cram her into a bunch of different roles in the narrative, and it results in her storyline feeling cluttered. That's a valid criticism. And to be clear, if you aren't a fan of Discovery or you don't like Michael, that's fine. You don't have to like a thing to criticize it fairly. Now let's talk about Rey, because Rey also gets called a Mary Sue. And the main reasons I see are first that she knows how to fight despite having no formal training, and she's talented in a bunch of combat scenarios. And second, that her force powers are stronger than they should be. Other people take issue with the Finn, Rey, Kylo love triangle, and I can see why, because it is incredibly annoying. But Rey is not a Mary Sue. Well, she's good at combat, and yes, the new Star Wars does an awful job with power scaling. It isn't unique to Rey. Every facet of these movies have bigger, badder weapons and bigger, sillier ships, sometimes in absurd quantities. Legions of soldiers, despite allegedly being defeated in the original trilogy. The new Star Wars movies definitely felt like a Marvelization of Star Wars. And J.J. Abrams in particular needs to stop being given sci-fi series to reboot. I will never forgive him for Star Trek Into Darkness. I am still mad.
My name is Khan.
Ugh, no. Shut up. No one cares Benedict Cumberbatch.
I'm still mad. Rey's combat proficiency can at least partially be explained by her rough childhood on Jakku, where she had to learn to fend for herself to survive. We also see her trading scrap, which might explain some of her mechanical proficiency later on. So I don't really buy the argument that she's just good at everything for no reason. It seems pretty obvious that Rey had a harder childhood than Luke, growing up by herself on Jakku with no loving Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru to keep her stocked up on blue milk. To be fair, I guess Luke doesn't have Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru around for long though, so... And the fact that she's super powerful in the Force is allegedly because of a dyad in the Force between her and Kylo Ren, and like, is that ridiculous? Yes. But it doesn't make her a Mary Sue. Are Force users in this movie too powerful to the point of absurdity? Yes. Are the action sequences and fights just totally over the top? Yes. And does it make Rey a less compelling character? Yeah, I think so, to an extent. But Rey's still not a Mary Sue. In the first movie, she doesn't really do anything important alone, and she always has someone helping her. In her battle with Kylo, she only wins because he just murdered his father, and he's gut-shotting off his game. It's also worth noting that at first he has her on the run. He is advancing and winning that fight until he hesitates and she centers herself. And this is already after he's traded a few blows with Finn, and again, he's bleeding from a substantial wound in his abdomen. And even then, she basically just wins flying by the seat of her pants because she's the protagonist. In The Last Jedi, Rey falls for a super obvious trap.
It was I who breached your minds, and you would not wipe wise enough to resist the bait.
And she gets literally smacked upside the head with a lightsaber and has to be rescued by Kylo. She also shows a weakness to the seductive whisperings of the dark side, although the movie really doesn't do much with that. Rise of Skywalker. She dies and has to be resurrected by Kylo. And yes, it is hilarious that all along she was a secret Palpatine. Like, who was that for? Who asked for that? I want to know. I really just want to be a fly on the wall in the pitch meeting for that storyline, because why? Whose idea was that? I just want to know who thought, yes, this is a satisfying conclusion to the mystery of Rey's parentage. People are going to love this.
Or a Palpatine.
Thanks, I hate it. But she's still an incredibly flawed and naive character. She isn't magically competent in all areas and able to do everything. And she consistently needs help and to be rescued, actively rescued. She's also not totally in control of her force powers. We watch her accidentally blow up an entire ship because she doesn't know what she's doing. Is Rey a poorly written character? Yeah, yep, I think so. I think most of the characters in the new Star Wars trilogy have a lot of major problems in terms of their writing and characterization. Like, the writing in these movies kind of feels like it was written around the effects and battles they wanted to do. Like, the Palpatine nonsense just felt totally shoehorned in, and the ending really felt just anticlimactic. But Rey isn't bad because she's a Mary Sue. The new Star Wars movies aren't bad because Rey's a woman. They're bad because they're poorly written by a company that's mostly interested in money, and it shows. You don't have to like the movies, you don't have to like Rey, although honestly, despite my overall lack of enthusiasm for the new movies, I kinda do. Daisy Ridley's a cutie. It has to be stated in no uncertain terms that these movies would have been exactly as bad if Rey were a man. Her gender's not the problem with the story, so why are you using the gendered term Mary Sue to critique her character? Instead of lazily criticizing her with what amounts to, this character is bad because she is overpowered and a woman, and thus is a Mary Sue. Try actually breaking down what's wrong with her. What do you like and dislike about the writing, the performance? There are so many ways to criticize a female character without being reductive. The use of the term Mary Sue is a sexist label because it's often misapplied and used as shorthand to dismiss characters. It doesn't really fit at all into its intended usage, which was more of an in-joke among fan fiction authors about poorly written fanfics. Now it's instead used as a way to denigrate female characters regardless of whether the term remotely applies. Obviously, I can't stop anyone from using the term Mary Sue, but I think female characters deserve better. If we critique them, it should be more substantial than just calling them a Mary Sue as a substitute for bad. And if you're not sure how to do that, try criticizing them the same way you do male characters you dislike, because we all know you don't call them Gary Stu. Seriously, don't lie to me in the comments. Don't you dare. Anyways, I know this video was a while in the making. I promise I will have more content for you soon. But that's all I have for you on this. Let me know what you think of the term Mary Sue. See you next time.